Discord?
Is there a what?
A vote to kick button in Discord.
No.
Yes, let's all vote to kick Seth.
What?
Yeah.
I'm
I
getting
know
fired.
Yeet.
Hey, Joey,
Okay. Yes.
I'm making my own programming language.
Oh my goodness. We've
But
heard.
there's
That's
this-
awesome.
Yes, it is fun. It is so much fun.
Should be trash.
Describe it.
Probably.
That's why it's called BS.
Yeah, the language is called B#.
Yeah,
Um,
Brendan Smith.
And .bs, yes,
Yeah.
Don't you mean
Wonderful.
B. Octothorpe?
something like that. But it's so cool because when I make it, Antler, I'm using Antler, ANTLR, and when you create your language or the lexer and parser, it generates a ton of C++ code or whatever code you want. It actually can. Yes, it is so much fun.
Another tool for language recognition.
Oh my gosh.
So, hold on, Brendan. It compiles down to C++, which then compiles down to...
No. It doesn't compile. It creates a C++, a bunch of C++ files that will parse whatever language you create, and will create what's called, you can see in that picture that Joey has on the right, that's called an abstract syntax tree. Nope. Yeah, that. The tree looking thing.
Oh, shit, he's
It-
live.
It will create that in C++ when you input a string of the file.
Oh, the grammar tree.
Yeah, it's called an abstract syntax tree. And it creates the C++, it generates the C++ code to do that for you so that you can use, or whatever language you want. It supports Java, C++, C#. It does not support C because they use a lot of types and type coercion, like inheritance and stuff. So I think it'd be pretty difficult for them to try to make it in C. So they've just stuck with C++. Version 3 actually supported C, but yeah, they have support for C.
I just had an idea, a really bad idea.
Uh-oh.
Object-oriented assembly.
I think that's a thing?
Yeah.
Hey,
John, that's just structs with some syntactical sugar. Okay.
You're
Hey,
not
Joey?
wrong.
Yeah.
I want you to. My sister's kind of curious about the bunch, so don't mind if she wants to say hello. Just a quick.
Howdy.
Hi, peoples.
Destroy the interloper.
Good
Hi,
morning.
Kyle. What's up?
Good morning.
Destroy the outsider. Shoot the
Okay, the
core.
gang's all here.
Hey, Jacob. All right, now we can get started.
Gang's all here.
I think we should just give Joey or not Joey. We should give Brendan a separate like just talk for himself so he can talk about his language.
I mean, we could just mute him and not tell him.
We could do that
I mean-
too.
Well, I guess I speak for myself in that I actually am interested in what he has to say about that.
Just look into Antler. I've got an article. I'll link that, and I'll let that be all from me.
You ready to get started, Joey?
Yeah, sure. Did you want to do? Was there anything you wanted to do first, or
Talking about the quantum computing article is all I had.
okay?
I thought that was pretty sweet.
Yeah. If you don't know, quantum computing requires doing fun things with particles where they exist in a state that you cannot observe, or at least when you do observe it, it no longer exists in the state. And normally that requires you to be at extremely cold temperatures, below 100 millikelvin, and now it seems they can do it at 1 Kelvin.
Which
So-
that's a pretty substantial improvement.
That's like a factor of 10 at least.
Yeah.
You still
So
have
wait,
to have, yeah.
is large Kelvin good or is large Kelvin bad?
It's just like normal Celsius.
It's just 273.15 degrees less.
Yeah, 0 Kelvin is absolute zero.
No, I know that, but what I mean is in the context of quantum computing.
Yeah, we want to be able to do it at higher temperatures than 0 degrees Kelvin. That'd be nice.
Because you can't go less than, and we can't actually reach
Oh,
0. So
yeah,
the
yeah.
problem with trying to before is what Joey was talking about. You had to reach millikelvin, so you had to get as close to 0 as possible,
Oh.
and it gets more and more difficult the closer you get to absolute
Yeah.
0. So
You're talking
being
about
able,
environment temperatures.
yeah,
Yes. Like
I
That's why
see
we're
what
still
I see what the issue is.
You have to use a cooler for that CPU a little bit more substantial than the Bellows CPU that I shared earlier this
So
week.
what I'm hearing is liquid nitrogen cooled CPU.
Cooler
no,
than that.
like you have to have 8 layers of cooling, where the first one is liquid nitrogen.
It's pretty
It's the
fantastic.
same thing that they have to do with superconductors.
Good luck, I'm behind 7
I
proxies.
can teach you myself. Okay. Are we talking about this right now, or are we gonna do things?
Let's do things, but I am
gonna
really
do
interested
things.
in Antler later.
Okay. So, I believe I dropped a link to download Node. Here, where is it? There's a thing in here to download Node.js. First off, there's a link to in the general, just general. I'd link to this Google Doc, which you can access, and it has all the notes. And you could then mute me and just read through the notes and then pretend you know what's happening.
Well, we know what Joey does in class.
No comment. But download Node.js and get that running, because that'll take a hot minute to download. Do you want to follow along? Do you want me to just do it?
I'm just watching the live stream.
what are you doing?
We're gonna do some React.
We're gonna do some web dev.
Oh, that sounds miserable. Why are you doing this?
Because it's gonna be great for hackathons.
And
Oh,
also,
yeah. Okay, fair.
it's good for hackathons, and also chances are, if you're in this industry, you're going to have to do web dev at some point or another. Anyway.
No, I will not.
Nope.
Well,
isn't it-
okay, you are a person with a stable job. I don't have a stable job yet, and unfortunately, most of the positions
Yes,
are
but you're
web
gonna
dev.
either you're gonna make all your personal projects what you want to actually do. That's what I did.
That's actually not a bad idea. So I'm
I like
hearing
C++.
is
I do C++.
so I'm hearing is language interpreter in React.
Oh no.
Will you use Dreamweaver?
Brain fuck interpreter. Brain fuck interpreter.
No. Okay. So,
Shut that down.
if you have installed it, hopefully you've installed it and you get it running on your system. I'm going to
Twitter
start with
sentiment anal. Got it.
Wait, what?
What?
Okay. So what you do when you have it running, theoretically you'd be able to. It installs npm, and theoretically we can look at the version number.
6.14.4.
Yes. Theoretically, what it also installs is npx. Npx has this great thing. Are you guys ready to create your first web app? Okay, you do npx create-react-app, and then whatever you want to call it. So ACM app, and it has to be all lowercase. I think it's very stupid.
It's very
Of course it's very
finicky.
stupid.
Trust
And-
me from experience. It took me about 5 hours to realize that I screwed up because I had a capital letter.
Yeah, it's not fun. So there you go. You let it happen. While that's running, hopefully it shouldn't take too long.
How is
But-
your computer so fast?
I paid too much money for it. Okay,
That's
What
very
is it?
reasonable.
understanding React. So if you look at the doc, let's see, can I zoom in? No, because Google Docs are annoying. It like zooms in everything. But whatever. Let's understand a little bit about React and React Native. So first off, you should know it's created by Facebook. They're the ones that keep building on it. And because of that, not only does Facebook, now Instagram, Netflix, the New York Times, WhatsApp, bunch of other things use React for their UI. And because of these so many big name people use it, it's very stable. Because if they do something that breaks, they're breaking their company. essentially. So that's one nice thing about it.
Web
The other
dev is stressful.
Hopefully they don't purposefully try and break their own stuff.
No, that's
would help.
QA's job.
Yes. So you can the other cool thing about this, which we'll kind of look into, is it's easily you can easily create things. If you notice, we've already created an application which we'll get running. It's going to be scalable, and it makes it really simple to make a nice front end. And the key to all of it is component. Components are the way of React. Basically, you have a component. So if we look at this web page, for example, you can think of the header as a component, maybe if you kind of divide it. And then we have like the main article section, and we have the garbage side, of ads and the stuff you don't want to see. And then within that, you have more components. You have like the actual article text, and within that, some other stuff. So you can start to maybe see how, when you think about your normal way you'd build out a website, I'm kind of assuming you know a little bit about HTML. That was the wrong button. Where you have kind of things are layered within each other. It's a very, very similar feel with React. In fact, one of these links gives you a great little picture. If I can find it, it should be this one. Where they have this kind of UI, and you can see with each of the little colors, that's how they kind of break it down. So you have the main component with little components inside of it. And the cool thing about it is you can put each component in its own file, and then you're separating out all the work, so everything's kind of modular. And that makes it really nice.
Question.
Yes.
Is a component pretty much synonymous with object?
Not synonymous, but you can think about it in a similar way.
A component is a class.
Yes, but it has extra things on top of it. So you can think of it like a class, but yeah.
Basically, everything in React is based on the component. And the component is a class. Anything you make that is supposed to be displayed on a web page can be made to extend a component. Does that make sense, or am I speaking weird?
No, that makes perfect sense.
Okay, good.
So
it's like a Java FX element, except not insane.
That's what I was thinking.
It's like a Java FX element, except it wasn't made by a person who wants to hate everyone out of their field.
That sounds about fair. Okay. So it'll make a lot more sense when we kind of dive into some code and look at what components look like. But I should just finish wrapping up a little bit of the overview. The other thing there is that's part of the React kind of world is called the Virtual Document Object Model, the Virtual DOM. And what the DOM does is it's a great thing because basically it handles, how the user sees the page. It does the fancy updating, which means that it can keep track of what's going on behind the scenes, and then it only updates what needs to be updated. And so that makes it really nice. Because one, it's going to be able to make your code pretty clean, because all you have to do is update a thing and then it automatically figures it out. But it also it runs pretty efficiently.
So kind of like streamlined Ajax.
Yes. Yeah, I'll leave it with that unsure answer.
It's easy to grasp.
Yes, it is.
Firmly grasp it.
It's easy to get once we start digging in, and you're like, oh, okay, so this is a component, and it has other components in it. It makes a lot of sense for what it looks like, and this fancy thing called JSX you're going to be like, oh, that's kind of cool. At least I thought it was kind of cool. So we'll get into that. The other thing is testing. And since all our components are kind of like modular things, well, if really all they do a lot of the times is just send input and then display something to a screen, and the components themselves return things. They return, what their view is. In which case, because it's just basically, you can think of a lot of it as just functions of JavaScript functions, it makes it really easy to test them as well. So, okay, enough talk about that. Let's actually do something. I'm not used to that. So, what I did, I ran the npx command here. I'll leave this up for a little longer. I ran the npx create React app and then whatever directory. I think I called mine acm something. Let's see.
ACMAPP.
There it is. So I can move into that directory, press, and then enter npm start. And it'll kind of get things running. And it automatically jumps it up, puts it on the whatever port, the 3000, on localhost, and boom. We got a working React app. Great job, guys. End of the meeting. That's it. That was the whole thing.
Just sell this to a company, you'll get millions of dollars.
There it is. Okay. Yeah, I mean, Facebook did. I stopped doing that. I get. See, I feel like I need to talk with my hands, but I can't, so all I have is a mouse. Okay, so that's
why not use a webcam?
Because I don't want to. Well, I do, but it's not the same.
Why not use the eye trackers?
Open this folder.
You need to move the cursor expressively.
Yeah, it's way more fun. I am going to move this over because we want to see the code, and the website's fine. And I moved it onto the wrong screen.
Why not just open the console in code?
That's not the point. Gonna move that there. Okay, so in here there's 3 folders. Well, there's a couple folders. There's some initial stuff it makes, like a README, which is kind of nice. It automatically sets up like Git to get going. It has some initial files which we'll look through. It has a public directory with like the icons and some initial stuff. It has the index.html file. And if we look at it, if I can zoom in, but it doesn't look like I can do it the way I wanted. Is this the shortcut? Hey, that was the right shortcut. Can you guys read that? Is it too small?
That looks
Good from my end.
I can read it.
Okay.
The upper portion is kind
read
of
it.
blurry for some reason.
Oh yeah, that's because it's red on black.
Probably.
But the lower red on black was fine.
See, the video encoders, it sees the red text and it wants to make it black.
Again, the bottom red text is still fine.
Okay, but the main thing to look at within this file, you actually really never edit this. This is kind of the HTML template, and from it, the only thing you have to notice is we have what's called this root div tag. And what's kind of fancy about that is then if we go over to our index.js, we have the great React DOM. Look at it in all its glory. And it renders our app.
Fine, stop.
And then it gets we do a document get element by ID. And so it renders the root with the app in it. And you think, oh, that's kind of cool. Do you know what this app is?
No.
The app is a component. And so you can even see just the initial index.js, which it just created for us, automatically sets up, our first component to look at. And everything we're going to do, we're actually just going to build stuff inside of the main component. So we can look at our app. It's quite a fancy app. And basically, we see our component. First, we have to import React. Then we import the logos. We can display fancy things, and we import our styles because we're great web devs and we make things look pretty. But the main thing to see here is your app. What?
Speak for yourself.
Oh yeah. The app is, in this case, it's a function. In other cases, we'll see it can be a class. So that's one thing to know about components. They're not necessarily classes. Sometimes they can just be a function.
That's weird.
But the way to think about this is really think about it like sometimes it's nice to think about it as a function, because when you're just creating text to show to the screen, you'd get the input of what text you want to show, and then you return the formatted text. So this is kind of like fancy formatting that then we just wrap it all together into a modular little function or a component in this case.
So rather than like going full blown and needing a full class, I just need a function. And
sometimes,
right? Okay.
Sometimes a function just gets the point across, because in this case there's nothing fancy here. It's not like we're passing data to this. This is basically a static page for all things considered.
Mm-hmm.
Other than it's got a little rotating thing, but because of that, it doesn't really need to be passing data back and forth. It doesn't need to be storing data or anything. So a function actually kind of makes perfect sense.
Highlighting it makes me feel uneasy.
Oh, okay. I will stop doing that.
I'm not telling you to stop. It's just like I didn't know that was a thing.
Okay. So let me pull up my notes to see where the heck I am. I'm going to keep them up on my vertical monitor, but you can easily follow along. So we kind of looked at the init project a little bit, and you really, you have a lot of these you can call components just as their own HTML tag, which is, I think, is really cool. There's a bunch of other files in here. They kind of scare me, so I don't look at them.
It just works.
Yeah, I'm assuming they do things with probably a bit with React DOM and other handling fancy things, but for the extent of what we're going to try and look at, it's pretty unimportant right now. Yeah.
One thing that you can do with components that's really nice is you can just basically shortcut away all the class name, relations, href, etc., and you can just make it easier to read at the expense of having an extra file.
Oh, I created a file. So close. I thought I created a folder. What we're going to do is we're going to create our own components now. It's about to get real exciting. And we're going to be good workers and separate our code out into folder structure.
Lambdas to the slaughter?
Yes. So, we're going to create a hello.js, and from there, we're going to create a functional component from scratch. Are you guys excited? Because I'm excited.
I'm not excited. You said it was in Scratch?
Okay, so we're going to import React from React. And that basically gets us ready to use React. And we're going to start by making a functional component, just so even though we already had an example one, it's nice to go through and kind of make a simple one ourselves. So we have our hello file, so we're going to have a hello component within it. And essentially, what our function or our component is going to do is just display hello world. So if it's a function, we should probably return something. In this case, we'll return, and then this is where it gets a little fancy. You'll notice I opened some parentheses, and that's because essentially in React, what you can think of it as is you have JavaScript code that has HTML inside of it. And so essentially, it's going to be, we're going to look at it a little more later. It's called JSX, but it's like a fancy way to have your JavaScript code kind of work with HTML tags. So for instance, we created our function, and all it does is return a h1 tag the header 1 tag that says hello world.
Could
So
you try
quite-
moving
quite-
the window around a little bit, Joey? It's kind of blurry.
Yes, here, actually.
You could al-
Yeah, I can't make out any of the text either.
It's only
Zoom
on the
thyself.
top. Like if the bottom half of the window looks perfect. The top half, absolute crap.
I think it's
Is
the
it
bit
still
rate.
bad?
No, it's better now.
Yeah. I mean,
The very, very top line is you can't read it, but
Really?
yeah, the
Import
top half of your computer. Because the Chrome is also,
Yeah, it's weird.
yeah, it's
Oh,
just the
whole
top.
half?
Are you
Yeah.
streaming on Twitch? Because I think it's just the
No, it's
Discord
Discord,
streaming
yeah.
setup.
Yeah, no, I'm
Yeah,
not
that's
streaming on
perfect.
Twitch.
yeah, now we can.
That's better now.
Okay, then I will zoom out a little bit.
Still good.
Okay,
Da-da-da-da.
that's all of the important stuff. So, the last thing we need to do is actually make this we need to export it as a component so that we can use it in other places. And to export a component, you'll be shocked that we do export default and then the name of the component.
Blowing my mind.
I know. So really, once you see the kind of the cookie, what's the word I'm looking for? The cookie
Cookie cutter?
cutter. Yes.
Modular.
Yep. And basically, everything is going to be similar. You can add some functions in here and stuff, and start defining variables and do whatever you want with it. And maybe we'll look at that. We'll look at that in a little bit. But for the time being, this is really all it boils down to is you have a function that returns some HTML.
So it's pretty
in
much
this case.
just like on-the-fly HTML generation for the
Yep.
browser.
Yep. And so if we jump back to our app.js, we can do something a little fancy in here. We'll do at the very top. Well, first off, we have to import. Always remember to import your components. So we'll import hello from, and then we have to remember that we're in the components folder, and then it's the hello.js. And then end it with a semicolon. So let's see if that worked. And if you were really paying attention, you would have noticed when I press Control S, this kind of updated, which will be cool in a second because now we can use that hello as a self-closing tag right there. And when I save this, oh, look at that! It automatically updates the page. You probably can't read it, but
Yeah, we can see
here,
it.
I can.
Yeah, we're good.
Okay. It says it has that hello world, which we just created from a function. And in fact, if I go in here,
That is so little.
yeah, I can update the file, and when I save that file, it automatically updates.
So could you go back to the other folder where you called that function or the other
Yep.
file?
So all I did was I imported the component from the file. Let's see if I can shrink this down a little. Imported the component from the file, and then all I did was within the div tag here, I added the hello component.
So that syntax essentially just inserts whatever the function returns into the HTML at that point.
Yep.
Yep.
So if you moved the hello to a different spot, it would insert the hello world in a different point in the page.
Yep.
Yep.
In fact, let's do it. And self-closing tag. Now it's also at the bottom.
Oh, okay. So you can call it multiple times. That makes sense.
Yep.
That's
You
pretty
can
sweet.
throw them. Theoretically, you could probably start doing some recursion within there, but that's
Hello, yeah, brother.
So we won't do that right now. But yes. And as you'll see later, you can actually start doing things where we could have this later as a not self-closing tag, if I can remember how to do things, and pass child components in it later. So that
Oh, that's kind of cool.
I don't know if I actually get into that, or I just leave that as an exercise for the reader. So that's functional components. And so this is where I wanted to take a step into maybe a little bit of more what's going on under the hood. whether you like it or not. Um, so this is called JSX, and it's handled by the React DOM, and that handles it and figures out what's supposed to be on the screen. Theoretically, you don't actually have to use JSX, and maybe it'll make more sense when I start writing it. So I'm going to comment it out. You're going to see how it works under the hood, and you're going to say, I never want to do that in my life ever. And you will forever use JSX.
Hey, question, Joey.
Yes. Does
React support component interaction? Like, can you have an input and output on that component?
Yeah. So that you have to look at the component flow and how they relate to each other. But you can layer components within each other, and you can pass data down components, and you can pass events up components. If that's what you mean.
Yeah, that's what I meant.
Yeah.
Just curious.
So that has to do with the props and then the properties of components. You can add properties to them, but we'll see how that works. I think I have that eventually. But so maybe looking a little bit under the hood of this fancy syntax, this fancy stuff. What we can do, do I do it? I gotta look at the right file. Here it is. So what we can actually do is define this as with the React DOM, and we'll do export const hello, and then we make. I don't fully understand all that's going on. So you define your constant hello component with a lambda function that then returns the h1 tag that says hello from function. And this is kind of confusing.
Hell from function.
Oh, that didn't work. Does not and then you need to export it. It does not contain default export imported as hello. Okay.
There needs to be a default.
Oh yeah. I'm done. There it is. So you could do it with this confusing notation. I guess this is similar in a way. And then from there, you could do other things with it, and you can call the React DOM to edit things. And in my opinion, that gets kind of complicated. So having it in this nice format here.
More like duplicate, but wow.
Is nice right here. So that was a little bit. I'm sorry. There's in the I'd link a video series in, I think it's the first of the resources to check out. And this is, he goes into a lot more depth than I fully understand on how to do some of that. So if you're interested, that's out there. So are there any questions so far? This is, I mean, we kind of just did this, and it's relatively simple, but
yeah, I think that makes sense. I forgot lambda expressions were a thing.
Yeah, they kind of scare me.
Lambdas are disgusting.
Well, maybe lambdas think you're disgusting. Use them in an application more that's actually good, like not Java effects that you might actually have fun.
No.
I'm just saying.
So the last thing to point out here is that what happens here with this JSX is it's actually transpiled into JavaScript. So all this fancy stuff actually will then get transpiled into JavaScript, which actually does all of like the editing and adding, and it calls each of the React functions to figure it out.
It's a fancy word.
Yeah, it is. I saw it and I was like, ooh, that's kind of a cool word. I'm going to use it.
Love it.
So this is a functional component. We are now going to make a class component, which I personally prefer, but we'll get into reasons why you use each. So we're going to create a new one. we'll just call it welcome because it's going to be basically the same thing, but we don't want to have naming concepts. We're going to call it welcome.js. And I'm going to open up my sample code so that I know what I'm doing. Okay, just like the other one, we have to import React, and we have to import component. And component is actually, it's a class we're going to inherit from. And that kind of makes sense that if we're going to make some type of a component thing, we need to kind of inherit from something that has all the extra functionality. We also need to import, actually no, we don't need to import anything else. So we are going to create our class. We're going to call it welcome, make sure it, it matches the file name, and it extends components. So a little fancy. And so what we've done, we've imported things, and in our hello function, our hello component, which was a function it just returned stuff, and it's relatively simple. With a component, we use the render function.
Do I hear a cat?
No, of course
Bye,
not.
Brendan.
Wow, Brendan. Wow, that's a loud cat.
I love her.
The cat's gone. You can continue.
Within the render function you can think of is basically it's the return function of the component. It's what's really called on when you need to get the data. And it's also going to be automatically updated and called when you update things within the component. When you update the data and you link data within your render function, it automatically will update things, which will be cool to see. It's going to be crazy. But in here, if I can learn to type, we're just going to do another hello, but this time from a class. Whoa. And then I'm going to save it, and it doesn't do anything because, well, we've made a component, but we haven't added it to our app. So this is pretty straightforward. Instead of just returning things from a class, we have a class that extends a component, and it has a render function that lets us do things. So nothing crazy there. But when we go back to our app.js, we can import that new component. We can import our welcome from, and then components, and then welcome.js. Okay, so now we've imported it, and we can throw it right below our hello. And we're going to get yelled at for something that I did wrong somewhere along the way. Does not export. Oh, I'm stupid.
Didn't save?
No, I didn't do the thing you're always supposed to do. This right now is just a class. We need to export it to be a component. Go. Okay. Your render should have a. Oh, wow! I feel really stupid.
It's all right, Joey.
I've been doing this for like a week, so yeah. When your render function, it returns things for obvious reasons. It's not just automatically going to return and spit things out. What this means is, again, like the functions, we can add logic in it and do other things. Okay, my stupidity aside, to recap, you have a class that extends component, and that render function is where we can put our fancy stuff, where it will return the HTML, or to be more precise, the JSX, that will then be displayed.
So, question.
Yes.
I can
Answer.
then create different methods, different functions inside of that class and call just those?
Absolutely.
Fantastic.
And that when you think about it this way, when you start having these classes that they're going to have, you can think of like private variables. When we think about our normal programming, in this case, we're gonna call it a state. But then you can start to think about it. Oh, well, when we start building out a website, we have like the main page, and then that has some data in it, and then that passes it down. And this example here really kind of hammers home that idea of you can really divide something up, and you have the overall thing has all the data, and then it passes specific pieces of data down the line. And having it in this kind of modular structure, it actually really lends itself to doing UI exceptionally well.
So another question: can I use this for UI other than UI that'll be used for websites?
Yes, with React Native.
Okay, makes sense.
And I know there's a bit of a difference between the two. I haven't used React Native. I know Nick Albani's done a bit more, so you can message him.
Okay.
But essentially, if I know correctly, it's this same kind of idea. But then you can do mobile apps. You can also do just like desktop applications. So that makes it even more modular in the sense of being cross-platform as well.
Okay, makes sense. And just the I'm just this seems very similar to kind of what we had set up at work, where we had sort of like at work we did, you know, applications that users on the floor would use, and we had a C# template that we would, start all of the projects based off of, and this seems to basically just give you a framework to start off of in a similar way.
Yeah, with the npx, there's some other commands you can make. I think there's other ones, other initial applications. But there's a lot of stuff that npm can do. For instance, I have another project which we might look at, which has some authentication built in, and all you had to do was a couple installs through the command line, which is really nice. Also, it's still running, which is nice.
Fancy.
So that's one of the other things. If you remember when we talked about Linux and being able to install stuff from the command line, it's a very similar feel with how you do this Node.js. Oh, jeez, I keep getting excited. I get excited, man. It's similar kind of feel with creating and setting up these applications.
Okay, fancy.
So we looked at the two. We have a functional component and we have a class component. And in my opinion, well, the other thing that I haven't really mentioned is that you can maintain a state within this. You can start having, local variables within here. And so you'd think, well, why don't we just make a bunch of class components? That's where my head was initially at, because I like classes. Seems nice. But the reason to have functional components is a lot of the times you use them where possible. And the reason being is that functional components are inherently going to be simpler to look at and understand. And you can think about this a lot of the ways, like if you have a class and it has states in it, you don't know if necessarily what you're doing within the component, it might change the state. There's kind of that hiddenness of what's going on underneath that you don't necessarily know about. With functions, normally it's just input, output, easy to test, easy to write, and easy to tell what's going to happen. So that's the argument between the two. The class style also has other things that you can add beyond just having a state. You can also provide life cycle hooks, which I haven't looked that much into, but I'm assuming that has part of it when you start loading and unloading and other methods within the component interface that you inherit that you can access. So there's the other things. There's just additional functionality, but sometimes the functionality might be too much to get in the way, and a functional component covers what you need. So a lot. I think for the rest of this, we're going to look at the next thing is to pass properties to our two functions that our function and our class, and then we'll wrap it up by looking at the state so that you can see it, and then that kind of gives you enough intro that you'd be able to hit the ground running with something. So passing properties. We are going to start with the functional component, if I can find my example code so I don't look like an idiot. So our functional component, we have the hello. And what you don't see here is that this, if I do this correctly, going a little off script. We have the props component, and theoretically we can do a console.log props. There's way too many things to get in the way. See if that's okay. It didn't crash, so that's pretty good. And then within here, let me jump back to the other code, and it should be here. And then basically I'm making sure that I write the additional things correctly. Within this, we can just add simple things like test, and then that equals some value. I don't know. Okay, so what we did here is basically we kind of attached like a property, or well, literally we attached a property to our component, and then that's getting passed in to our component, and then from there we're going to log it to the console. So fingers crossed, if we open up the console, well, we can see even though I know it's way too small for you to see it, that we have, look at that, the test and value was passed. It's going to be passed as like a JSON type. That's the properties is kind of like a JSON type thing going on, where you have the key value pairs. So in this case, let's see if it matches what we did. We have test is the name of the variable, and its value is value. So look at that. That's excellent. Did exactly what I was hoping. That's shocking. And that's great. But now we can get a little fancier, and we can actually take this. I'm going to put the word function in all caps and save it. And within our JSX, we can actually access that variable. So I'm going to get rid of the word function here and do props within curly braces. So this is how you know how to go. You can add the JavaScript back within the JSX. We can do props.test, because that's the variable that we named. We named it test. And so all we're doing is we're just adding that value right in here. And now you can see, boom, automatically updates it. And so now we've passed data from our app component down into our functional component. And then we added that within the JSX.
Wow, fancy.
Yeah, and so you could end up doing like a bunch of fancy stuff. And one of the things within this example, what they did was you pass in the list of items and the price, and then it formats, it just formats them automatically for you. And potentially then maybe you have to pass the data down another layer, more things. In each layer, maybe you're doing a little bit of processing that makes sense as you go. But so this gives you a lot of options here, because we didn't add any fancy logic, but you definitely could, and that's what makes it powerful. So that's the functional component version.
That's pretty nifty.
Yeah, I saw it and I was like, oh, it's just relatively straightforward. I mean, once you see it once, you just match the syntax. You're like, I don't know, it's weird syntax, but I guess we'll just work with it, and it just kind of works out that way.
Yeah.
I just wish you didn't have to deal with HTML at all. I don't see why that's necessary, and they couldn't just make that like classes themselves.
Because then it would have been hard to, because one, you still need you have to look at the index.html, but theoretically you could do it with nothing but the React DOM and calling and editing parts of the.
No, I just feel like React I like it for web dev. I hate it, but for web dev, I like it.
Yes.
And I just feel like, why do you need the only reason that we use HTML is because it works for defining a hierarchical view of it. Since you already went to a class-based view, just stick with that and use classes as the component. So your H1, just call that a header. Tell it to make a header and give it the value of X of your components inside of that. Like I don't see why they would stick with HTML since they're already virtualizing the DOM to begin with.
Yeah. I guess I don't know. I think there's still something to seeing the HTML within it. I don't know. It's semi-comforting to be able to. It's just you can immediately look at it and see what the HTML is. And where I feel like if you added a layer of abstraction between tags and the HTML between the tag, then that's just an extra layer of abstraction that you didn't need.
I mean, I like it. I'm not sure. I don't know. I'm not a fan of HTML though, so maybe that's just me.
That's pretty fair. It's pretty fair.
Mr. C++.
Heck yeah.
Yeah. You would say that. Because C's better.
I was just agreeing with what was said.
C's better.
Ooh.
So we did it with a functional component. We will now do it with a class component. This is going to be real exciting. And what we're going to do, let me make sure I do this correctly. Oh yeah, this one's easy. So we can do the same test variable, and this time we'll call it a class, and we'll do it in all caps, and we're going to do it the correct, like this, and save that. And nothing happens because we didn't change anything yet. If we go back down here, this is kind of nice. You have to remember this is a class, and so what we can use is this keyword to access the props, and then within that we can call that test variable, and that's how you access the properties. And so theoretically, we could have done some processing above it to edit it and change things about it, pull apart the data however you want to do it. But that's the other thing. So that's how you pass data down with class component.
Fancy.
Yeah. So all this, it's surprisingly simple. You just kind of look at what other people have done, and you just like, okay, and then let me just throw my logic in where I need to throw the logic.
So Sam, are we gonna redo your entire website in React?
Yeah. He's muted me, so it's okay.
So does all of the conversion to HTML take place on the server side or the client side?
I would assume it's the server side, and then it figures out which part to update, because I don't think this is ever actually sent all the way to the user, and I kind of hope it isn't, because this is where you can throw like authentication stuff within here, and then
Oh yeah, that'd be awkward.
So then is React mainly something that runs on top of Node?
Yes, I would think so. I'd have to dig more into it to know exactly, but
Cool.
So the other thing we were going to look at with components, with the class components specifically, is we're going to look at the state. That kind of gets us into the last thing. So the state is managed within the component, and so to start off, what we can do is we can actually look at some of the other methods that are within our class. And obviously, if it's a class and we're creating things, we can have a constructor. And within the constructor, you should call the super method, because we're inheriting from things. So when you have a constructor, it makes sense to call the constructor of the superclass. When we initialize our component, what we can do is set the state. So, it's class based. We use this keyword to get the state, and then we can set it equal to whatever we want. In this case, what I'm going to use is the message variable, hello from the state. Nice and simple. So all I did was we created the state and we gave it a message. And from there, so that's going to be handled within the state. And from there, we can go down here. This is going to break the code, and we'll explain why in a second. I can have a paragraph tag and then put within it the this dot state dot what was the message within it, and I hate that it keeps covering things up. But so up in the constructor, we define the state, and we gave it a message, kind of property with the value hello from the state. And then within that, we added a tag down here that'll print out the message. And now I said this was going to break it, and it did. So that makes me happy that I know it's happening. The reasoning that it broke it is because when you return, you essentially can only have the first layer of tags that you're returning. There can only be one tag in it. So essentially, you need a parent tag for everything to kind of wrap it all up. Otherwise, it won't be able to figure it out. Why it's necessary and they couldn't change it, I don't necessarily know. It seems kind of pointless, but that just means you wrap everything in div tags. And then, I don't know, assign some fancy stuff to it, but I know it works. So that initialized the state.
So, I guess I'm trying to understand states better, because, again, relating this to work, in our programs, a user would make certain selections, for example, and then certain options would be available to them of things that they could do depending on the state. Is that sort of the use case in this situation, if that makes sense?
Yeah. So let's make something that'll affect them. Let's add a button. Buttons are cool. And so buttons have the on-click kind of property, whatever you want to call it. What we can do is have that on-click relate to some of our JavaScript code. So in a second, we'll create a method that'll change the message. But what we can do right now is pass it a lambda function to the this.change method. So we'll create a method called change message, and we'll call it when it's clicked. So it's a little hard to see because there's so many opening curly braces and parentheses. But the on click is equal to, and then we have to do open curly brace because we're putting some JavaScript code within the JSX. And so we're gonna put it in, and we're gonna have it call the this.change message. And then from there we can finish the tag and give the button a little click me button, a little bit of text, and close it off. So there it is in full, is a button that you click on and it calls the change message. So we should create the change message variable, or change method function. Okay, well, let's see if I can figure out how to word. This is where it can be a little annoying to see sometimes, but if we do this, we can't, the state, unfortunately, is immutable, meaning you can't change the value. So what we actually do is we just kind of override the, and we're going to see if I do this right. What we did was we're setting the state, so we have to open a parenthesis, but then we're going to be passing our state, which is these key value pair things, which means we need open parenthesis, open curly brace, which is annoying to look at, but that's how you do it. And now we're not going to change the value, but we're just going to set it to something new. So updated state. And so now we have our button over here that we click it, and it automatically calls this method and updates the state. And from here, we could have read the state and maybe done some other logic depending on what the current state was. We could add a counter or whatever, and you'd be able to figure that out relatively simply. But that's kind of, you have to use this kind of an annoying thing to use the set state, but that's just part of the React world. There's some syntax you just kind of Google and find out how people do it, and then you have it.
So it's like a state machine.
Yes. Unfortunately, something in computer science is related to a state machine.
I see.
Huh.
Sorry, I've been kind of half paying attention because my son is doing things like making me jump
he should
and
be
stuff.
learning some React.
He's sitting in my lap now.
Good.
At least he's not spinning you around like the other day.
Yeah, it was fun.
So that was kind of the main. That's kind of everything you really need to see. I kind of wanted to go back through. I know I keep bringing this up, but I think this is just such a great walkthrough on what a breakdown on the thinking. And I think once you understand the thinking of how this is all going to work, I think that it makes it a lot easier to understand a bit more of how you can use it. And then from there, you can just Google the rest. So they start off with this. This is essentially the design that somebody handed to them. This is what we want it to look like. They have, a little search bar, and then it looks up they have, their inventory, which they get from some API, which you can set up with something else. So, and then they want it to look like this. It has the name and the price, and it divides it into sections. And from there, then you also have what the data looks like, which is, it lists off all the pieces, what category, if they're in stock, etc. So this isn't terribly exciting, but this is where you can, I mentioned this before, the breakdown of the UI. So you can think at the highest level, we want all the data. And from there, we need to pass information. We're going to handle information with the search bar. And so that'll kind of be its own thing. And then that'll help us determine what data we can then pass down to the kind of like output table. And then within the output table, you have each section of the output table. You have each, entry. And that correlates to one piece of data. So, you've kind of, the first layer, you pick out which pieces you want. You pass that down a layer. That layer picks out all the different pieces and creates stuff for it. And so that makes sense. You can start to see the flow of data just by breaking down the UI, which is nice. From there, they start to do things, and I think just looking at the final one gives you a good representation. So I'm going to start at the bottom, the entire thing, and then work the way up. I don't know if you can read that. Oh, much better. So at the bottom, we have the render and we have the products. And this is going to basically, I believe they use just functional components. They might not, but so you have your products here, and you can see when they render this is the whole table. So it sets it up, it gets everything. It has a search bar, which they pass stuff to it, the initial things, and then it has the product table, and the product table gets all the products, and it checks what things are filtered and stuff. And so that's kind of the first layer. We saw that. We can scroll up to then look at the search bar, and the search bar has its, it's a form that then has some text input on what you want to search. And then from there, they have a little bit of commenting, and some other text. But it sets the value to this filter text, which is a property, which you can then kind of scan back up here, and then because of this super component, if you want to think about it that way, it can then pass the data around. So we have the search bar, which handles the searching of what we want. But if we start looking at the product table, you can see we're passing down the products. So if we get to the product table, and this is where you can see a bit more of like some actual logic going on. What they do is they loop through all the products that were passed by just doing a little for each loop, and then it checks certain things. It's using some lambda functions, which might be a little annoying, but essentially they're building up this rows of data where the rows are literally just more components. And so when you look down at their render function, the return of their render, they create the table, they have the table headers, and then the table body is just their rows that they've built through their logic. And the logic just builds their product category rows and the product rows. And so essentially what you can read through this pretty straightforward as here's the table headers, here's the body, and the body has rows. And those rows are some type of other component. And you've been passing the data down, taking apart one layer at a time. And so if we look up at the product row, we can see it gets the product, it gets the name, and it returns just the table cell with the name and the next cell with the price. And so we've gone all the way from the top layer, which has the search bar and product table, and then you just pick which things you want to pass down, and then you kind of break it apart as you pass down the line. And so I think that kind of sums up the thought process, and then from there you just have to Google, how do I add this extra thing, or how do I link these things up? I think that just about sums everything up that I wanted to talk about. I only went through maybe the first 10, 11-ish videos of this video series. Excellent video series. It's well broken up. It's easy to follow. Highly recommend it if you want to keep learning, or if you just want to put them at 2 times speed, you can crank through them real fast. And then this is the link.
We call that Ben Shapiro speed.
Oh, yeah. You gotta put everything at 2 times speed. It's more fun. I like going through like an hour-long lecture in 30 minutes. It's great.
I found this really great thing that we were doing for work. We had to watch some videos, and I can't watch it on 2 times speed, but I could watch it at 1.5. It was so much more tolerable.
Yeah.
Also, if you ever want a set of videos on embedded development.
Wait, you have those?
It was just a set of YouTube videos.
Oh.
They gave us the link to. It's amazing.
You should drop that in the chat. I'm actually interested in that.
Yes.
Sorry to interrupt.
No, you're good. So that's those 2 things. Also, think about it. If you're making components, why can't I just get components from other people? And well, you can when this page loads. Eventually. It's kind of impressive. Oh, is my stream still running?
Yeah, your stream's.
There it is. Let's see. Can I get started? Where's the examples? Where's the browse themes? Am I still going?
Yes.
Yeah, you're still streaming, but your browser says there's no internet.
Oh.
You have internet. I can see your icon.
It doesn't show it for me. You're gone.
Oh. Well, if you were able to, I'm editing offline. No idea.
But we can hear you. We can hear you.
It's kind of Okay.
Hey,
here
there
you
we go.
Look at those.
Oh man,
It's
now your
my-
stream is doing some crazy geometry shit.
That's a quarter.
It's on something.
But so I don't know how well you can see it, but there's a bunch of these component, look at all these like component
$69.
things. They have like
That's
cards and
not-
graphs. So that's another thing, because you're just making components, everything's modular, you can just rip off other people's stuff. Which is always fun. Who doesn't like
No, you have to make everything yourself. Make your own operating system. Make your own.
No, I've seen it done. It's not cool.
Yes, your brother did.
It's what a guy. So
Hey.
but that makes it real nice.
He was
You can
cool. I knew him a little bit.
You can just rip off other people's stuff. It's like Stack Overflow, and like you just copy and paste. So that's that. Other React component libraries that you can get. There's a bunch of them, and some people like just all they're really good at is just getting all of them, and then you can just make great UIs if you just know how to use somebody else's code, which is kind of cool. You can also, for those maybe more web devy than the rest of us, there is React Bootstrap that you can do. So you can strap your components to make them nice layouts and stuff.
Lit.
Bootstrap is lit. I've looked at it. It's not terribly complicated. It's a little different, but it's not too bad. I don't know any of these that actually show it, but so there's that. Also I have, this is the sample code. What is this? Oh yeah, AWS will host your React stuff really easily. And you can see that here. You can just deploy it, and it's like simple. And then you can also add authentication. So I want to just pull that one up real quick.
Hey, could you hold that thought real quick? I got to restart the stream for me.
Yeah, go for it. Let's see. It's one of these. I think it's this one.
All right.
Well, and if I do npm start, the other thing is npm makes it really easy to start things up. You just type npm start,
NPM
and then
is
theoretically,
awesome.
it takes a hot second. Oh yeah, you can use TypeScript if you feel. Yes, use another port. So this will load up. It always takes a hot minute the first time, because I think it actually has to connect to AWS too. And I haven't used this in a little bit, so the connection might be slow to get going. But what I do is you have a sign up process. You have I'm gonna move this down so you can see a little better. There you go. Look at that, excellent formatting. Okay, you can put in a username. I think I already have like a billion of these, so I'm gonna use test 10, and a password that's super secure. Enter in your phone number.
PASSWORD. I'm sure that's just a coincidence of the length.
Oh, it is. It really is. Okay. And what you can't see right now, no, do not add this to LastPass. Let's see if I can. Does it send me the email or does it send me the text? You can set it to send. So right now it's looking for a confirmation code, and it either goes to phone or email. And I don't know if I set this. You have to set up the settings correctly. I go in depth on one of my repositories on how to set it up correctly. I don't think I set it up correctly on this one. But from there, then you can do like the confirmation and stuff, and then you can format this all you want. So if I had done it correctly, this would have been more impressive. But yeah, so that's another thing. And if you look in the code, I have a component. I have my my app component that renders either the sign up or the sign in process, and then from there I have like a sign in form that does a bunch of stuff. you can see like it checks if there was a sign-in attempt or other things. So there's a lot you can do. It's cool. Yeah. So that's React. Good luck. Figure it out yourself.
Sick. Awesome.
I have a question.
Yes.
What's Joey the Juggler?
Oh, didn't you know Joey's previous life?
Nope.
So
oh,
there's
is that you?
juggling.
Oh, that's before the beard.
Yeah, that was junior year of high school.
You had hair.
This is my website. Look at that guy.
Can we make that an emote?
What a legend! Yeah, yes we can.
Me with hair.
Oh wow.
Yeah, I did balloon animals for people, for kids parties. It was 100 for the first hour, 75 for every hour after. Crocker Park hired me a few times. Great Northern Mall hired me once. Let me tell you, for a high school student, making that kind of money in like a day is hilarious. I was a glorified babysitter, in honesty. So I still have the business cards, actually. If you want a business card, I have like 1,000.
Is that actually hosted somewhere, Joey? Is that website, or is it just?
Yeah, it's on Wix.
Wix
on Wix site. So
I'm trying to punch it in.
Oh, here, I'll copy and paste it.
Okay, there we go.
Because we cannot read that upper bar. At least I can.
I could, but I typed it in wrong, I guess. There we go. All right.
I did not know you were a juggler.
I don't think I've ever actually had somebody try and send me an invoice, an email. So who knows?
Oh, we can change that right now.
Yeah.
So which one are we making an emote? Is it the one with the apron, where Joey's wearing the apron?
That might be too much detail. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Joey. Appreciate it.
Yeah, no problem. Hope
So
it was useful.
there's this whole thing is just a library, right? And there are different libraries, I'm sure, that can also allow you to do this. What are some? I guess my question is, what are some similar things to React? What are some similar libraries to React?
I don't necessarily know if it's similar libraries, and probably somebody who's more experienced with web dev would know a better answer.
Okay.
WebAssembly.
There's WebAssembly is pretty neat. But that's a little different from React. Like there's other JavaScript frameworks that kind of accomplish the same goal. There's two that I can think of the top of my head: Vue.js and AngularJS.
Yeah.
Okay.
But even those are frameworks. So that's one of the. I think that means it's a bit different, but I think it's similar. But
yeah, I honestly don't know. I don't know what makes React a library compared to Vue and Angular.
Okay. Cool. I was just curious. Well, if nobody has any other questions, I guess that means we're all wrapped up for because I don't have anything else.
So I posted a thing, the quantum leaps. So we were actually required by my work to go through all of those videos, and he's actually still making more. They are amazing, and they start out super slow. Like if you go to it, the first video is like variables, like int. Oh no. It's like it puts the dots real close together. And then 10 videos later, he makes an operating system.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. Like it just accelerates. And then it's like, what? He literally makes a real-time operating system while you watch him. And he goes through exactly how it works. And it was amazing.
Is that the video that you shared? Or the video series that you shared?
Yep.
Okay.
If you ever want to touch embedded development, watch.
Oh no, it has polymorphism in C.
Yeah.
Oh.
That's part of the
That's the
yeah.
Antler thing or something else?
No, Antler's. I'm making my own programming language, and Antler is to help you parse the language.
Where's the link?
It should be the last one in ACM. It's after the Antler stuff.
Oh, I just remembered.
It's called
got
statemachine.com. Yeah, it's awesome. Seriously. If you ever want to touch embedded, this will just watch this and it's like a Thomas class in like 20 videos. A Thomas season. What are those called? Semesters. I've been out of school for so long.
Oh, jeez. Calm down, Brendan. You're not that. So I did actually have one more thing. If you guys are interested, I created a survey. I'm about to drop it in the chat, and it's just some ideas that have been mentioned recently for future, I guess next week's talk, or not next week, but next meeting's talk. So I just dropped the Google form. And if you guys
Can
have
we
any
vote
other,
on like making our own programming languages?
I should have put. I'm gonna put an other another option where you can submit your own.
Yes, please.
I'll
do that.
You're
I'll
on.
present.
You're on the form, Brendan, for as a creating languages lecture. I like option number 4. Make me talk about any topic at all, and you guys vote on the topic.
Let's have him talk about quantum computing.
Oh, I hate you. So I thought that might be a cool event. You could watch me flail around and try to explain something and never want me to explain anything ever again.
I can only first off, you misspelled Kyle.
You know what, Joey?
But also I can only check one of these.
Let me see if I can change that. Check boxes. They're all check boxes now.
Okay.
So if you refresh the page.
Also, just look through those set of videos. They're amazing. Like, look, in like 5 videos, he makes an operating system.
That's a little crazy.
And then, yes, the polymorphism in C is also fun.
I can't even... Oh, my goodness.
Yeah, make your own virtual function pointer tables in C.
It sounds like a lot of work.
It's really not. He makes everything so simple.
Well, that's cool.
Yeah.
As long as he puts the dots close together.
He does. And that's what's amazing. Like, yeah. But like the first like 4 videos, getting started, counting, literally like a I++ thing. Like,
oh boy, this survey, I can already tell.
You like my response?
I can already tell what's.
Where's the survey?
Oh, I dropped the link in the Discord in general. I can already tell that next week is going to be me talking about some topic. Oh, this is going to be rough.
Let's have you talk about what have you learned everything in nonlinear?
The stuff towards the end's a little rough, but I'm getting there. Yeah.
You should talk about B trees.
That one I'll have to brush up on, but I could probably do it. But everybody knows about B trees. That's like an upperclassman.
There's a button for creating another response. Did you know that?
Yes, I'm already getting things like Kyle's son eats ice cream on live videos.
Oh, I want that one.
I know. Why is everybody voting for Brendan?
I don't
Maybe
really know.
Brendan is voting for Brendan.
Wait, are you stop?
It's another response.
Oh my gosh, Brendan.
This is why you set it to require an email address, buddy.